America, land of the free, home of the brave, a nation of immigrants. In this video, we will analyze the surge of immigration that occurred in the Gilded Age. But to understand this, we must first understand our history of immigration in our great country, America.
The years from 1630 to 1640 are known as the Great Migration. Many immigrants were pilgrim descendants of the Church of England or Puritans who believed in purifying the church. In this time, 20,000 people arrived to Massachusetts in about 200 ships.
By the 1700s, immigration from Scotland, Ireland, and England grew substantially. Around 15,000 people came from Ireland in 1750 to 1759. 25,000 people came over in total from Scotland and Ireland in the period from 1715 to 1755. However, in the American Revolution, the Germans had settled in America and they made up the largest group in the nation.
Sadly, involuntary immigration also occurred during this time. Between 1700 and 1750, about 300,000 Africans reached the 13 colonies. From 1750 to 1790, around 20,000 slaves came to the southern states each year. African ancestry made up 1/5 of American population. In 1860, 4 million slaves lived in the United States.
Immigration in the early 1800s came from mostly the same countries. From the 1820s to the 1840s, the German and the Irish were the two largest groups of immigrants in the United States. Successive waves of immigration diversified the country from its origins in white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism, while enlarging and expanding upon the definition of the term American. In this 20-year time period, approximately 90% of immigrants to the U.S. came from Ireland, England, and Germany. By far, the Irish were the biggest group. In fact, in the 1830s, Irish immigration rose to 350,000 people. Recent Irish immigrants, especially Irish Catholics, were frequent targets of xenophobic or anti-foreign prejudice. The arrival of so many Irish Catholics almost doubled the overall numbers of Catholics living in the United States. By the late 1800s, discrimination against immigrants was still ever prevalent. Immigrants from Asia, Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe faced varying degrees of discrimination. Beginning in the late 1890s, the majority of arrivals were from Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe. In that decade alone, some 600,000 Italians migrated to America. Jews from Eastern Europe fleeing religious persecution also arrived in large numbers. In fact, over 2 million entered the United States between 1880 and 1920. Chinese immigrants also arrived en masse during the California Gold Rush, and most lived in California working menial jobs. The immigrants that faced the most discrimination were from China. Chinese immigrants arrived en masse during the California Gold Rush, and most lived in California working menial jobs. By 1852, over 25,000 Chinese immigrants had arrived in the United States, and by 1880, over 300,000 Chinese people were living in the United States. The development of these anti-immigrant ideals developed into legislation.
There were a lot of negative reactions towards immigration. This nativist viewpoint led to discriminating acts such as the Chinese Exclusion Act and the National Origins Act of 1924.
The Chinese Exclusion Act was a federal law signed by President Chester Arthur, which prohibited the immigration of Chinese laborers. This was the first law restricting the immigration of a specific ethnic group in the U.S. The Chinese Exclusion Act required the few non-laborers who sought entry to obtain certification from the Chinese government that they were qualified to immigrate. The 1882 Exclusion Act also placed new requirements on the Chinese who had already entered the country. If they left the United States, they had to obtain certifications to re-enter.
This ban was renewed by the National Origins Act of 1924, which added Japan and other Asian territories to the list, completely banning immigration. This act established a system of national quotas which determined how many immigrants could enter the United States by country of origin. Some Americans feared that the Anglo-Saxon heritage of the United States was becoming diluted by the mass immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe.
During this time of immigration in the United States, many people were confused and worried about the immigrants coming over. However, some were excited about the diversity that the people were bringing to America. Lots of people began to investigate the social implications of them coming to America, thus allowing for the creation of theories on immigration.
There are many different theories on immigration. However, there are two main ones that stand out. The first theory is the melting pot theory, and the second was the salad bowl theory. Wow.
The melting pot theory, which was coined by people during the 19th century, was the idea that all the cultures of the immigrants would melt together to become a better American culture. This term came from a play called The Melting Pot by Israel Zangwill. This play was an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet and was a romance story between immigrants. It was the first metaphor to be developed in America that was used for immigration. In the following century, during the 1960s, the salad bowl theory became a common term in society. This idea contrasts the melting pot theory because it says that the different cultures would come together like a salad, where the ingredients work together but don't blend into one another. You can think about Chinatown in New York City, where you see people of different cultures living somewhat separately, however they are still living in harmony with those of other cultures.